Hello, welcome to the Purple Rock Podcast. I am your host, Matt. With me, as always, for this Cook Islands rewatch is Emma. And with me, I guess now always is Andy too.
Special guest
Andy,
star.
yeah, you're just still guest star. Okay, fine. Are we going to promote you to the series
Gets that
regular by
and
the end of the
credit.
season?
No, I get a salary commensurate with such things, but
Yeah.
no, my agent and I have had this discussion. If
Okay.
I deign to do this level, I need the extra special credit.
I see. Okay. Well, we got the merge this week in Cook Islands. Very
Yeah.
exciting. Everyone's favorite episode every season. Maybe, probably not. I don't know. But it's a good one this season.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is legitimately one of my favorite episodes of Survivor of all time. Like probably top 5.
Right.
It's good. I'm
Right.
excited.
Okay, so since you're all giving me so much good stuff, let's just kick it off. We open up with Penner complaining about those damn kids. This is kind of like classic Jonathan Penner, isn't it?
Yeah, we start off we start off with the merge in general, and so then they're like all on this boat, and these kids, I can't do a Penner impression. I was gonna try, I cannot, but they're always trying to get faded, and that's
Which is not what I called it.
I was like,
Honestly,
I don't think that's what we called it in my day either, so it must be like right in between.
No, faded is like
Something else.
60s. It's like 60s or like early 70s. Like that is old slang. That is old slang.
I know it in terms of being cross-faded.
That's not what he was referencing.
I didn't think
but even
so.
before the boat,
Also, to be clear, I don't know it in terms of anything.
Right. But even before the boat, he was complaining about his tribe. He's on the beach and he's like, well, now they kept me around. If they don't start working, and doing as much work as I am, like, I'm not going to carry them anymore. Like, you were just groveling and working your butt off to save yourself. I don't think you can be making demands of these people now.
And when he was out fishing, they're like, we should probably have a fire ready for when he gets back. And then they just don't.
Didn't. Right.
Which, mood.
Right. And
Relatable.
Then he gets back and he's like, hey, why don't you have a fire ready? And they're like, well, don't tell me how to do this. I know how to do it. And it's like, I'm not sure that he knows you do, though. So...
Yeah, there's nothing that can get somebody like on the bad side of my wife more than like tribe on Survivor or people on Survivor shown to not be doing their chores around camp. As soon as she sees that, she was just
real mom energy.
Just fuming, and I'm like, this time completely well earned. His tribe sucks, as I've been saying every week.
Yeah.
They're awful. But sometimes I do have to caution. It's like they're not always lazy. That's an edit that they're being given, especially if you apply like a certain like Peter Griffin color filter to like check to see whether it's like edit or true laziness. But in this case, no, like we saw them being like, we should probably
Yeah.
And again, just more effective storytelling by the show of these people suck. Can't wait to see what happens, right?
Gosh, Jonathan sure doesn't seem to be getting along with Raro. I wonder if this will have an impact.
Right. And they can't really edit away the fact that Adam's throwing up off the side of the boat 5 minutes later, or that he is like completely, like just totally blasted. He's slurring his words, he's stumbling around, he's hitting on Parvati, which, come on, dude, you already got someone out here.
Yeah, like even she just has that sort of like almost you would experience in real life if like a guy who has a girlfriend is like, what about Candace?
Yeah.
Literally on the same beach as we are. Also,
I'd like to amend my earlier statement. The easier way to get on my wife's bad side is to be shown, cheating on whatever story level, girlfriend, spouse, partner that you have.
Real wife energy there.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, Boston Rob would never, right?
Would never.
Absolutely not. He would throw his own game away and write an initial on his arm. to try to save. But no, shockingly, Adam is no Boston Rob. I don't even think he's a Marquesas Boston Rob.
Wow.
Yeah.
No. I mean,
that's dark.
Maybe similar douche.
That bummed me out a little.
But, you know.
I honestly don't even think he's the level of Boston, you know, the son of Shane from Panama.
I thought you meant the city of Massport. He's
no. He might be on that level.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like he exudes a real Midwestern douchey energy.
Yeah.
To be fair. There are different flavors.
I could see that.
Yeah, I mean,
he's
basically,
definitely
he's
never
more prone to
surfed,
saying
so
the
he's
hard
not a
R,
West Coast dude.
Right.
Sure.
I don't know where he's actually from, so.
I don't either, but the energy he exudes, that's what it tells me.
Adam is from every fucking college campus, and you know
that's the thing. He's just frat energy. It's just
100%.
Yeah.
And you know the scene with Parvati is just like, yeah, of course. Like nothing that's shocking. Adam is the thattiest that guy in the history of Survivor.
I hate him. The frat thing, maybe when I was in college at orientation, they did this whole sort of sketch thing that kind of hinged upon the idea of us being like fierce rivals with a school in Malibu, of which no one cared after orientation. Like we weren't good enough at sports to like give a shit about a rivalry, but that was like the thing, who are their rivals. And in this, where they're making fun of the guy who's playing like the kid from this school, he's just, you have 2 popped collars. And Adam would definitely have 2 popped collars.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's definitely true.
How is it that Adam doesn't have a puka shell necklace? Like he's on the show.
Well, again, he's not from the West Coast. He's not from the West Coast. That's why.
Different layers, different kinds of douche.
Oh, we assume he's not. We actually haven't checked this.
I mean, I can, if you guys talk enough, I can try to look it up.
No, we're not checking this. We are not going to check this. No one checked this. But anyway, so the episode sets up why Jonathan might not be getting along with the rest of his tribe as we head into this merge. And then Yul comes up with a plan.
Yeah, so we see, you know, Yul and Becky together, first of all. And he's sort of like, you know, we do need someone. Like, you know, we don't have the numbers. Is it crazy to think that Jonathan would work with us again? And they both together talk it out and are like, you know what, above all else, he is logic-based. He is rational. Yep. And so we can appeal to him on that level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and frankly, what else? You know, like even if Becky wanted to be like, I don't know, because she didn't view him the same way when they were on the same tribe, right? She was more along the, you know, chorus of this guy kind of makes me feel yuck. We should get rid of him. Like, I don't like his scheming ways, which, you know, to be fair, I think is probably an accurate. Like, you know, Yul was the only person not getting that. Becky.
He did
exactly. You know, Becky might have nailed it, right?
Reasonable assessment there.
But like, who else, man? Like they just spent the whole
definitely not gonna be candid.
Part of them, everybody like drinking up a storm and puking off the side of a boat, you know?
Right. I mean, and the thing is, if you look at the other people, you know, it's definitely not Candace. It's definitely not Adam. It's definitely not Parvati.
Yeah, they don't even know Parvati.
Right.
Adam.
So like Nate's the only other possible, and frankly, they know it's not going to be Nate this vote, even if it could be in the future. And I think they probably get the sense it couldn't be. But and if you know it's not going to be him this vote, then who's your only shot this vote?
Yeah, like there's definitely seeds of like an Aussie Nate thing, you know, and them having a bond. And
that's an Aussie Nate thing, not a Nate the rest
exactly.
Of the thing.
And it's especially, you know, I think is that going to help Yul and Becky in the long run? Is Nate going to be with them if they're a group of 5? You know, who would Penner more likely be with, Yul and Becky or Ozzy and Sundra?
Right.
That said, the scene does give like a good example of the partnership of Yul and Becky, and like, you know, in this instance, the sounding board that she's able to provide. Because in the end, it's like we never see her go to Penner, right? Like this is Yule's move. He is the one with the idol. He is the one with the relationship. So, you know, it is fair to attribute it to him, but that counsel he's able to get with somebody that he trusts, it really, I think, helps power, you know, both the decision making and, you know, what we'll see, you know, for both of them throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, and like I think it probably is Yule's initial idea, you know, but I also think that the counsel she's able to provide is really important because she was someone who didn't trust Jonathan earlier, you know, and frankly was right to not trust him earlier because again, he did mutiny. That did happen. So she was right to kind of trust that, you know, instinct she had. So if he has the idea and he sounds it off her and she agrees it's a good idea, that like doubly reinforces it then. You know, like this is like two people working together who have enough different perspective on this one person that if they can agree that this is a good idea, it's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Right. Especially because it is kind of a bold, you know, it's a bold move. It involves telling multiple people that he has the idol. You know, at this time, he's really only told Becky. It could have gone another way, you know, and to do that, you know, without kind of consulting everyone could have led to disaster. So yeah, it makes sense, you know, needing to talk that out first.
Let's actually talk about that part. Is it necessary that Yule tells Sandra and Ozzy that he has the idol?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
100%. Yeah.
Because if not, Ozzy's making his other plans, and we saw what those other plans could have been.
Exactly. Because that's the way you keep the four people voting together for this vote. You know, if they don't know he has the idol, they might be trying to get in with a larger group and basically leaving Yule hanging out to dry. Even if he then plays the idol, it's then hard to rebuild that trust.
Yeah, and how do you put all this work into potentially flipping Penner, but you lost Ozzy, right? Like it doesn't. Absolutely, you needed it if you're going to try and work this as anything more than protecting yourself, the way it was the season prior for Terry. It's like this is a group effort. Well, then the team needs to know the play. They can't just go along with
the last thing you want your allies to be is hopeless.
Exactly.
And think that your case, or rather to think that the alliance is hopeless, and that it's 5-4 and that's all it is. And maybe we can, get in with people so that when they eventually want to target Adam and Candace, I'm someone they can work with. But instead it's really like, this is us four, we can go. It is.
Yeah, and he talks about that part with Becky as well. It's like, what's the harm in telling everybody? Now, I remember, like, the way he phrases that, and then what we end up seeing is, I think what he means is, Ozzy and Sandra. But at first, it's like, if it's everybody, man, like Becky's being a really good friend there because the harm is they vote for
the harm is
that's the harm.
Yeah, no, that is 100% true. No, but he meant, and I love actually the scene when he tells Sandra and she starts dancing, and then you see Becky coming dancing. That is a great little scene.
I also love because it shows like Sandra, and Sandra sees Becky, like there's no qualms about the idea that like, oh, Becky already knew. And she was like, yeah, Becky already knew. And she's fine with that. And now they all know, even if she maybe hadn't known for days, it's like, of course, Becky's who he would have told first. And Sandra's fine with that. She's just like, hell yeah, like we got this.
Yeah.
And they do indeed got this.
Right.
But it also kind of shows that it was probably a framed thing. Like Yule and Becky maybe were talking, and then Becky, I could even imagine a scenario where Becky's like, Yule, it's your chance, go tell her, right. And then she's just waiting off in the wings.
Totally. No, I totally think that's what it was.
It's adorable. I loved it.
Because they are magical and wonderful, and the Aitu Four are delightful, rainbow made flesh, and of course the kids on the other side are horrible and deserve everything that's coming to them.
Yep. So then the other part of it is it's not just the plan, but like I love the execution of it. When he goes up to Jonathan and they start having this discussion, I love how Jonathan, even before like Yule really brings it up, is like, it's like, is there any way that you would work with us? And he's like, no. Well, hypothetically, let's say you had the idol. You would have to prove to me that you had that. And even then, I'm not sure I could do it. Hypothetically. And he basically sets up the entire scenario. Where at that point, I'm just kind of surprised Yule doesn't go like, yeah, I have the idol. That's why I came up to you.
Is that what you said there?
Yeah, that's what's happening here. But I love that Jonathan talks that through, and Yul doesn't have to say anything. Like Yul's just like, "Is there any way you'll work with me?" And Jonathan lays out the exact like way. This is how I'll work with you. So then it's just a matter of Yul meeting that expectation, which he did.
Yeah, I do love the like long play of just like randomly making it two parts, you know, because then it's such a great scene when he does eventually, you know, to skip ahead just a little bit when he's just like, you know, that hypothetical we were talking about. Well, guess what?
It's a great payoff, you know, and it's why I love Yul so much. Like that scene, he doesn't like immediately jump on it. He like lets Jonathan talk it through, and he lets him like go into his whole big thing, and then he like because he probably didn't have it on him at that time. He probably had it back at camp, and he realized that after talking to me, it's like, okay, he needs to see it. So like, can I show it to him? Is it enough that I tell him, or do I have to show it to him? And I think it actually is important that he showed it to him in that scenario, because that's a big move that Jonathan would be making. As he said, he'd be pissing everyone off, even more than he already has. So if he's going to do that, he needs to know that it's worth it.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite episodes of all time. That is one of my absolute favorite scenes in the history of Survivor. And unique in so many ways, because as I said, all the way at the premiere, like there just aren't that many Yul Kwans in the history of the show. And just the patience that he allows for the discussion to take place is almost unheard of. Like, and frankly, maybe impossible in modern Survivor. Everything flips and changes so quickly that, somebody who tries to be patient frankly might just lose their opportunity. People just be like, okay, not you, then move on to somebody else. But like just the control and trust in this, that he's able to just say "to be continued," which he does twice. It's almost like a catchphrase. It's just so perfect. And then and I think it might not pop as much if somebody is watching Survivor, like catching up on it, watching things out of order, starts from the past and comes here, which I should say is like not an invalid way of doing it. I'm not a gatekeeper in that sense. Whenever you come to the show, you come to it and then you watch the rest. I mean, yes, of course, Emma and I are severe because we've watched all the way through, but you're still allowed to do it the other way. But why I say that is
be as good as we are, and that's okay.
It's okay. There's sometimes just levels that people can't achieve. It's not your problem. I say that because it's the evolution of getting there is why I love it so much, because at that point I'm 12 seasons into Survivor and I'm like this is something I'm craving, just two people able to have a full-on calm strategic decision that like they're not allies. You can see that with allies, but two people like trying to talk things out and discuss moves, it's like that's rare. It's still rare now, but at that time it was unheard of for multiple reasons. One, there just weren't that many people that could work this way. There were former allies that had mutinied against one another, and there wasn't this tool that would enable such a strategic move. In the past, why would you bother? I have 5, you have 4. It's pretty freaking simple. Unless I hate the 4 that I'm with, or they've made it clear that there's no way for me to move. Pin in that, but we're gonna get to it.
Yep.
But I don't think this happened. Well, I mean, Penner says this will not happen if there isn't an idol in play. And just the way they discuss it, and as you say, the way Penner discusses it, it's an encapsulation of everything we love about Penner. For a lot of early parts of the season, we've saying like there's been things there, and we love this or that, but you kind of
this is the scene.
He isn't, but right here, because it's him deconstructing the moment, and it probably doesn't hurt that they clearly have like 3 cameras like right there. Like even this opening of the scene, it almost feels like they were like, and action, and then you was like, okay, so this is what like it seems like it's a beginning of like a dialogue scene instead of like cutting into the middle of a conversation. And I don't think that's by accident. I literally think like as they sat down and ready to talk, all of production kind of gathered around them.
Like,
wait.
It's like the Eliza moment.
The stick, it's like if you miss them getting the stick versus like if you miss Penner and Yul having an intelligent conversation, you're all fired.
Right.
And so it's just so perfect. And everything I love about this season, about these two people, about this show is really on display in that conversation.
Yeah.
And one of the best things about this episode is that it really puts Jonathan Penner in a real dilemma. If he, he's kind of in a damned if you do, damned if
As
you
he
don't.
says,
As he said,
either he turns on Raro after switching to him and he's a complete bastard, or he doesn't go with the Aitu people who he already betrayed and he's a complete bastard.
I think at this point, he probably knows he cannot win this game.
Yes.
He might, but and so as he's realizing this, as he's staring down the fact that Yule has the idol, as he has his decision to make, he realizes, okay, my only chance to win was if he didn't have the idol, if I stayed with these other 4 people, and then if they used me to break at 5, like if they used me to go like 3-2, and then I won a challenge at final 3. And even then he realized, I think the only person he could beat is maybe Candace, and I don't think he beats her. Like,
yeah,
I think he could have beaten Adam.
Could he though?
Let's see the math. Well, if it starts at Brad, now we're talking.
Okay.
So Candace, the point is, Nate are probably for him.
I think his only path was with one of those 2, because final 2 is what everyone's planning on, right?
Indeed.
So his only path is with one of those 2. But again, they'd probably take Parvati over him. So he wouldn't even be in that.
Oh yeah, position. No, and then it's winning immunities, right?
Yep.
So I'm not sure if he completely gave up, but I think he knows like the odds are pretty low, and there might be other motivations at play.
This is a man who understands the narrative.
And I think this is kind of where it kicks in. I think he understands his narrative in the game, and I think that influences decision as much as anything else.
So for the longest time, I've remembered it, as not as much a strategic decision, although he definitely presents it as such, and more Penner decides that he would rather lose to this set of people than the other set of people. I will say that this rewatch has made me feel like there certainly might be an element. I think there's definitely part of him who just wants to work with Yule. And frankly, that harkens back to my favorite scene that I was just talking about. I bet just having that conversation with Yule is like, fuck, this is everything I've been missing. These other morons, I can't talk to them about anything. Why did I ever leave this? This is
here's some grown-ups for a change.
Whether I win or not, because I do think that he knows that when he flips, winning is completely off the table at that moment.
Yes.
But I do feel like there was other strategy at play, because I think that if he doesn't go with it, it probably doesn't work out for him anyway, because he will no longer have a 5-4 advantage, now be 4-4, even if it's not them, right? Not him, right? They're saying that we'll vote for you. All he has to do is say, no, I'm voting with you guys. And then they're not voting for you. But now it's 4-4, and are you really risking rocks and all this and rocks with those people on your side? So it's like flip now or flip next week at this point. The only thing that he has is to convince his tribe to not vote for Yule, and apparently that's not going to happen. We should probably talk about that.
It is so funny.
I feel like that was the nail in the coffin for his decision. I think that was his, like, I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to really give this a try. I'm going to try to convince them not to vote for Yule, because, I know he has the idol. And so he basically says, like, hey, I don't, he goes up to Candace. He's like, I don't have the idol. You don't have the idol. She's like, no, I don't have it. Then he goes up to Adam later, and he's like, look, what if Yule has the idol? And they're like, he doesn't have the idol. And he's like, well, I don't have the idol. Do you have it? And I was like, of course I don't. And this is, I think, where it falls apart for him. I think they're all convinced Penner has the idol, and they just will not trust him when he says he doesn't have it. And I think that's just the end of it. They're like, of course Yule doesn't have it. He was there once. You have it. That's why, it's just, I think that's it.
It is so funny to watch, because first of all, especially before the immunity challenge, and there's the debate of Ozzy or Yule, they're not wrong to want to vote out Yule. The logic is that he is a huge threat. He is very, very smart, but that you have Parvati talking about how Yule has to go because he's so intelligent and he's so smart, but he couldn't possibly have found the idol in one day.
Yeah, that was the big disconnect that in her
like
game.
Parvati, you haven't been there. You don't know anything about what the clues are like.
Right. Now here,
like at least Candace and Adam have like something to back up, if they were like, I could not make heads or tails of that and yada, right.
But also, but you've seen Adam. Like, are you surprised he couldn't make heads or tails of those clues?
No, but that's my point. Like that they would be like, well, it must be impossible.
Well, no, I'm talking from Parvati's perspective.
But that's why she thinks better at it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I think like why they have to target Yule, for one, it's that this is very early on in idol things. Like people haven't factored it out, particularly a bunch of people that probably have never watched Survivor. For two, I think this is actually the makeup of the Aitu Four really helps in that there just doesn't feel like a motivation to go after Becky or Sandra. Right at this stage in the game, especially in the incredibly simplistic way that the Raros think of Survivor. It's just like, what does that do me? They're not going to win anything. I can get them whenever. So like if there had been another credible threat, then maybe Penner could have like, okay, not Yule, but somebody else that's, an important. It was also, like if Ozzy doesn't win immunity, I think this whole thing falls apart. Which gets back to the whole alliance part. And so but I think it's also in that discussion, as you were saying, why they wouldn't even like entertain the idea that Yule would have this, and made it pretty clear that it was annoying them that Penner was even talking about it. That's why he doesn't push farther, because like he never comes out and says he has it. I know he has it. He has shown it to me. I think he was testing the waters, and the vibe that they were sending him back is, shut up. You're lucky that you're even here. Stop talking. And the more you talk about it, it just makes us suspicious of you, that you're just trying to protect, the friend Yule, who Candace tells us that you were working with. And I think once he gets to that part, especially contrasted with the incredibly, mature discussion that he has with Yule, it's like, fuck it. That's who I want to work with. Win or lose, it doesn't matter. I can't move forward with these morons any further than I already have.
Yeah, we usually discuss this, this kind of thing later, but, I was watching with my husband, and first of all, like from the beginning of the episode, he was like, oh, Penner's gonna flip. He didn't actually, he said Jonathan because he doesn't know.
Right, yeah, he doesn't know, yeah.
Yeah, but and then more importantly, and to your point, when Raro is saying like, oh, you can't have the idol, he just goes, you can't work with these people, Jonathan.
Yep.
just leave them behind. You can't work with them, because like that's what it is. It's not just that like they suck. You can't work with them.
Yeah, I mean, so what my viewing partner was thinking during that scene was, she was just saying like, they're just not putting in any work. Like they're not trying. They're not like, they're not thinking at all. Like they don't want to think. And I'm like, yeah. That's right.
They want it to be. They want it to be. There's 5 of us and 4 of them, and now it's done.
That's it. Yeah. Right.
And beyond just that, and this goes back to them not doing chores around camp, this will flash forward to stuff that will permeate in the next few episodes. Not only do they have this insurmountable 5-4 advantage, but these are 4 of the most entitled people in the history of Survivor. Like imagine if like the fans of Caramoan, the cool kids group, were able to take control. Like that's what this is. They all are a group of young white people and Nate who have had like most things thrown their way, right? Like how hard has Adam ever had to work for anything? Do we think Foxy Boxer Parvati has been able to get by on the fact that she's really beautiful and very flirtatious? Like it's not just an edit, it is a philosophy that she espouses a few times. And like you see this, you see how the fact that they never plan out their challenge strategies. They're like, well, there's 8 of us, what does it matter? It's just they want it all handed to them. They hated when people told them what to do. They just want to hang out. And so the very idea that they need to think 2 steps ahead is like, no, stop doing this. I want this and I will get it, because that's kind of how life is for me. And once it doesn't become that way, and I'm skipping ahead, but it's like a pin of this discussion, watch in the next couple episodes the way they act when things suddenly, perhaps for the first time ever, at least for the first time ever in this game, do not work out for them. So
yeah, no, I completely agree. And that's definitely going to be a lot of what we talk about the next couple episodes.
Yeah. So Penner had this dilemma of what to do, and ultimately, like, he did not choose something that's going to further his game. Oh, spoiler, we know that won't. But ultimately, even when it's happening, it's like, thank you, Penner, for saving the season. But what would have happened if Penner just decides not to break from his group, that he votes for Yule, but he moves the target to Nate. He tells the other group. Right. And he doesn't tell his group in a way that would convince them, which I'm not sure is possible. So everybody's voting for Yule, and the Aitu Four vote for Nate. So obviously Yule is an idol and saves himself, and Nate goes home. What do we think the rest of the game is like?
So then you have 4-4. I think one meta question they'd have to answer is whether or not they'd replace the idol in exile. I don't think they would. I think that's an innovation they come up with in future seasons. I don't think they would have come up with it this season.
Yeah, let's set that aside. Let's assume not.
Yeah, let's set that aside.
Yeah, that's just, because I don't believe it's like just almost impossible to say.
Yeah, is there even exile from here on out?
There is. In fact, it's actually going to be a big part of one of the next couple episodes, because there's an auction, and we'll get to it. But basically, it plays a big part in an episode. Okay, so yeah, set that aside. I think it's right to set that aside. So then, the next vote, if they stayed in their current configuration, it would be 4-4. And, you said it earlier. Why would Jonathan stick with those people then? They're not going to be in his foxhole, and so then it's everyone's scrambling. But let's say the same person wins immunity next week that does. That would be who Jonathan would want voted out. And so then it becomes kind of tricky, because, who's he moving that target to? It becomes really obvious with, the response when he flips. But if he doesn't flip, it's not as obvious. But I still think that he would flip, because he wouldn't want to get into a tie vote, because why would he want to risk rocks?
Right. And the Aitu Four, especially with Nate gone, so there's not someone for Ozzy, to go for. And I think you could hype up Ozzy in a way to be like, going to rocks is like hardcore,
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, we know how Ozzy feels about going to rocks at a merge and not flipping. So I think you don't really have to worry about anyone on Aitu getting pulled over, especially again, since it's really just the white Raro people versus the Aitu Four. Yep. So I feel like they're going to stay strong.
But now here's the question I do have. If Jonathan voted for Yule this week and then flipped next week, when it was tied numbers to avoid rocks, would they hate him as much?
Yeah. The second he doesn't do what they want him to do, they're going to hate him. Because it is an injustice that I'm sure everybody watching will see, that this rat, Fink could do something like this to us. Hey. How dare he?
That rat Fink is just ridiculous.
But
the one thing I actually do wonder, though, I wonder if, sort of as we will see later, the problem is, how do you even approach a conversation with the younger Raro people? But like, if they could have convinced them, look, we're tied. You don't want, let's vote out Jonathan. You don't like him. We don't like him.
Yeah.
And are the Raros dumb enough to realize that they would then immediately?
The answer to both questions is yes. Exactly. I actually think that is something they might consider, because at this point, why? But Jonathan has flipped on you and then refused to flip the following week. Like, the only reason why you'd work with him at all is just like, hey, Jonathan, this is the way we're going to vote. Vote with us, or you might be going home because of a rock.
Right.
Why not go to them and say, hey, do you guys really want to risk your games to protect him? Hell, I told him last week I had an idol, and did he tell you guys that? No.
And if Aitu was really smart, what they would do is they would go to those three. They'd tell him, vote for Jonathan. They'd go to Jonathan and tell him, vote for Candace.
And then do like a 4-3-1. Or I mean, eventually, probably
no,
vote for Candace
and then
in
they
that
can
case.
just throw their votes onto whoever. They can throw it onto Candace, and if Jonathan didn't, then it would just, like, fine, okay, it would have been a tie anyway.
Yeah, in
and
that
if he
scenario,
did, it's
I
like, okay,
wouldn't
that's
vote for
five.
Jonathan, because why leave the three that are like tight with each other?
Yeah.
Leave a split group. Yeah,
Exactly.
and which all of this, like, so in all this, it's still not ever working out for the four white people, is I think what we're getting to. We're pretty confident that the Aitus are going to stay together because they have bonded on a level that those other four have not. That I think there's a real feeling amongst all four of them that they want to do this. Like, I think it's gotten to that point in the game where, of course, they all want to win, but there's our underlying motivations. The us versus the world thing is really kind of taken a hold, which is why I don't think Ozzy would necessarily flip. I think he was keeping options open with Nate, in part because at that point he doesn't know that he is not going to need another option, right? But like we see in the future, spoiler, like he'll never flip on this four, and he will have opportunities to do so. And so, I don't think it would have worked out, which gets into the strategic part for Penner. It's never going to work out once he knows that he can't convince his group to not vote Yule.
Yep.
And thus, if he's going to have to flip to save himself next week, he should flip now, where there might actually be some value to it. Because if he flips next week, there isn't any. He has proven to the I2s that he isn't a partner. And it's just, I'm just voting with you guys to save it. Now, do I know for a fact that Penner has done all that math? His strategy seems pretty simple of, if I'm with the person who has the idol, that helps me somehow. To his benefit, again, this is very early in the history of idols for Survivor.
Yes.
But it's possible, because I'm sure he does know what the tiebreaker is. They are actually told what these things are beforehand. So with that case, it is the best strategy, even though it's a losing hand no matter what. And frankly, it had to have felt good.
I mean, and I think it is funny because, like, when the vote happens, you see that he's like trying to avoid eye contact and stuff like that, because that's just the way it always is when you turn on your previous alliance. But inside, he feels good. We'll see that next episode. He feels good.
Well, and if you had any doubt, they get rid of it pretty quickly. The other side, it's like, okay, I know, I feel even better about flipping on you guys now.
Yep. So so we covered a lot there, I guess. Did Adam somehow get even worse this week?
I think we covered that too.
Yeah, we did, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, and the answer is yes, somehow. You think that, like, much like Emma and I as fans of Survivor, it seems like an impossible peak, but he had found a way that, like, you're not even loyal to Candace.
No. Yeah.
The person who threw away her entire game so you could kiss her boo-boos, and here you are feeling up her friend mere feet away from her.
Yep.
Also, like, doesn't seem to be like stoked on it either.
No, she's like, we're not doing that. And he's like, why not? There's a lot of me. And it's like, oh no, this is terrible. I don't want to watch this.
Gross. I don't like it.
Yeah.
Really the first time ever that Adam has had too much to drink and gotten unwantingly physical.
As we said, he's very fratty.
He's very fratty.
Actually, fitting into the discussion we were just having, because all of this move is centered around Yule's idol, which this is the third season idols happen. The first season's like a beta test of idol.
Doesn't count.
Barely even counts. But this is the first moment that it really matters. Terry's never really mattered, which is fine. If you win immunities, you kind of don't need to use an idol. And I mean, the funny other part is, like, the other tribe was like, I don't care if we'll just vote for him, and then you can just get rid of Arth.
Yeah, then Arth will go home. That's fine.
I love that so much.
Arth is like, excuse me.
I care. Whatever, dude. Get over it.
But anyway, meditate about it.
I think what this really, is what, and it's obviously a different idol than what we're going to see for most of the rest of the history of Survivor, but it shows the possibilities that idol entered into the game. And I think it really shows how much it improved the game of Survivor. and I think most reasonable people at this point wouldn't argue otherwise. If somebody's talking about how they want like a game of Survivor without idols, I think you can largely discredit them as like cranks. Like I think other more reasonable people will discuss like maybe there's too much idols or advantages.
Yes.
Fair. I think that's totally fair.
Yes.
But I don't think I would want to discuss anybody would be like they don't need to have idols in Survivor, because this just shows it. It gave other ways to think about Survivor and other moves to make. An imbalance that was created only because the show is like, hey, let's mutiny, was able to be corrected. And when I think about Survivor, honestly, like 3 of my favorite moves of all time, possibly my 3 favorite moves of all time, are all idol based.
Yeah.
This, It's a Turtle in Fiji, and Parvati and her 2 idols and Heroes versus Villains. So I don't know. I just thought it would be worth noting and discussing in the context of this, how much Survivor evolved from the simple act of adding idols.
Right. And one thing I was going to bring up when we were talking earlier was, what I think this episode and It's a Turtle in Fiji actually kind of show the 2 like early main plays you can do with it, what you can do with an idol, which is you can use it to sway someone onto your side, which is what this shows. And then this episode also kind of hints at like the way you get around that. Just don't vote for the person with the idol, which is what It's a Turtle does. It's like, okay, they think we're voting for that person. We're voting for this person, this other person. Who cares? Because once you get to a certain number, then you can split. The idol is a lot of power when it's a one person, like when you're only one person down. The idol has so much power there because it can really flip the game. But there are ways around that. And those 2 episodes are like the early strategizing of kind of like the chess match of idols. Splitting is an important strategic moment, but it isn't really a chess match in the same way. It isn't, or at least it can. There are some instances where it can be, and it's very cool when someone figures out a way to beat the split. But but trying to play the game of like, okay, who do I think they're going to vote for? I think they're going to vote for this person, so I'm going to vote for this person. But what if they vote for this person? Do I play the idol there? And that's, I think, where idols get really fun and really interesting.
And really quick, and then I'll let you talk. We think we should clarify for people that might not remember or realize. The difference between Yule's idol isn't just that he can play it after he knows where the votes are. He can only the idol holder can play it for themselves. So if they had moved the vote to Becky, he wouldn't be able to get up and say, I played this idol for Becky. If he wants Becky to play an idol, he has to give it to her before they go to tribal council. So that is important just in, how they could have beaten him is not voting for him. And while, this is early, and thus you can give them maybe a small bit, like they hadn't seen Fiji yet, or they don't vote for the most obvious person. It was also the thing I was screaming at then, well, not really screaming, hoping that they didn't figure out when I was watching it the very first time. I was like, why are they going after Yule? I felt a bit of Penner's thing, but also because I was worried. It's like, no, you got to vote for Yule because I want him to succeed and you not to. So yes. Splitting and not voting for the person you think has the potential for an idol, which should be important to note, is a limited subset because of the way that idols were distributed this season. Yep. It didn't take necessarily a dream about gypsies to figure it out. You just needed a little bit of time to think about it, and they have that on the island. I, only watching for 42 minutes a week, but sadly spending a lot of the 7 days in between thinking about it. But they have a lot of time, so they should have thought of it. What do you think about what idols kind of, because you've been watching right around all this time, starting at Pearl Islands and then kind of around this time. What do you think idols have kind of added to Survivor?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't believe in what we've watched so far. We've seen that we've seen an idol played successfully yet.
Certainly not in China, right?
Not in China and not in Panama. And it won't happen in Micronesia. So, and it doesn't happen in Token. Well, it might.
Oh, it does happen in Micronesia. It does happen in Micronesia.
Oh yeah, You're right, Amanda.
Yep.
They didn't show us her finding it, so I forgot. Okay, yeah, because I was thinking, I was like,
every...
is it not going to be until Heroes versus Villains? I was like, do
No,
we
and
need
then
to
Samoa
watch
like 3
Samoa
times.
just to
Yeah,
make sure he
Samoa's,
understands that sometimes the idols work? Like, it was blowing my mind. But yeah, so it has been just this fun thing. You know, we've seen Terry try to use it. We've seen Todd deal with it, you know, having a plan, but Denise not being able to eat balut, and then someone being, you know, elevated to this extreme threat level and not using it, because again, they were still pretty new at that point. So that's been fun, especially because he had seen most of Ko Wrong like way back when. So in that, you've got all kinds of idols and like different things, and you have the split idol. So in Pearl Islands, he was a little like, what's happening? Why would they tell them that they're going home? I'm like, they can't do anything about it. Yeah, and that's why having the idol is a good thing. You know, yeah, sure, sometimes scrambling can happen, but for the most part, there's this whole thing of like, oh, let's tell Melinda that she's going home because it's nice, and you're not worried that like something's gonna happen. And it's why, even though there is an idol, you know, this entitlement and stuff you'd see from Raro would be earned, because that 5-4, it's like, what are you gonna, you know, maybe down the line someone flips, but at this initial vote you're not going to be worried about it, because you know what, you're just going to flip to be the bottom of that alliance because you like them better. You know, it's still something that happens occasionally, but for the most part you need it. It allows for underdog stories, and I do think they've leaned into it a bit too hard today, because we don't need advantage guided, Jeff. That was not a positive thing.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously, you know, suggested that no sane person could ever suggest that there's not idols. Generally, if somebody does that, they're either somebody who hasn't played since the first 8 seasons and, you know, just happy that Dalton Ross had their email address, or, you know, they are like just a super long time Survivor media who, you know, time long since passed. But like some people like will say that it kills the social element of the game, and I'm like, no, not really. It adds a social element of the game. It's a social tool. Like, this is what we see happen. What we got out of this episode was incredibly dramatic conversations. You know, like that's what it all kind of boils down to. I fucking love it.
That's my shit right there.
I think Survivor needs a wild card, because there had been too established a playbook of, you know, you get to this point, you wait there, you get to the merge with numbers, and obviously every once in a while a person could be a wild card and
you don't have a Rob Sesternino every season.
But just like one other thing, if nothing else, as Emma points out, to prevent people from just being like, well, what are you going to do about it? We have our numbers and you're not in it, which was always incredibly obnoxious behavior. It's like kind of demeaning to another person. And frankly, it's a bit of the way that Raro was acting, in that like they're like, you know, we're the core, and not just in this episode, but in the earlier ones. And that was to somebody they thought had an idol. So yeah, and somebody they thought had an idol that they were planning on taking to 5. What were they gonna do? I don't believe they thought of it. I believe 100% they hadn't thought of it. Maybe at some point they thought they were going to try and sell them out before then, but more likely they did not think ahead, because that's for suckers and don't talk to me about this. But like, I think that in order to prevent Survivor from becoming incredibly predictable, and I've been watching a lot of early seasons, and there's a lot of that. Just like, it's a numbers game. We're at these numbers. Frankly, sometimes it's like, I don't even like my numbers, but numbers. You need this. But they've, in a lot of recent seasons, they've almost leaned too hard into unpredictability, to the point where things start to become formless. You know, to the point where, well, what's the point of having plans if everything is just going to blow up at any time? You know, what the nice thing about the idol when it was, you know, deployed, you know, early and through, is it was another plan you could have. It could be a tool that you use to enact plans, but now it's like, I got an idol, he got an idol, another idol is going to show up, I got to save these coins in case I get an idol. You know, there's some balance that hopefully they'll address in future seasons.
So at the end of this episode at Tribal Council, Jeff started bringing up the idea of pairs, and we talked a little bit about this last week, about how usually in Survivor pairs are seen as dangerous. But people were just kind of openly talking about like the duos that we got in this game. And there were two that were mentioned in particular. There was Adam and Candace, unsurprisingly, and Yule and Becky.
Which was funny because Becky was sort of the one talking about Adam and Candace, and they were like, oh, but the closest people here are you two, which might not be wrong, but very different levels of closeness. Gotta love Penner being like, oh yeah, Adam and Candace, they seem to be bond, but I don't think there's anything romantic going on.
just another great example.
Now, to be fair, I guess romance isn't the word I'd use either.
Right. It's horniness. You nailed it, Jonathan Penner.
You know,
full of sin. Yeah. But like, I guess they really hide their making out in the woods or whatever, although Parvati certainly knows about it. I just watched and I was like, their breath must be awful.
Oh yeah, it's the worst.
Yeah, and also you're gonna get those cuts infected. Stop that. I will say, like, on one hand, I could understand people underestimating the power held by Adam and Candace, because, you know, you just see them as like, yeah, okay, they're morons. But we just saw it. Like, they just got rid of 2 other people in order to keep, you know, their love shack going. So, like, you don't have to be a genius pair. Just being a pair has power, especially if nobody is going to stop the pair, you know.
Yep.
So, you know, you don't need to be a genius pair like Yule and Becky, for instance. And I think with Yule and Becky, basically, Candace did them a favor on that one. In that once it was just the 4 of them, it's like, well, Sandra and Ozzy need them. So it's like, even if they know that like those 2 are unbreakable, it's like, that's fine. There's 4.
Yeah.
We need them to be unbreakable anyway.
I guess we'll pretend we're also unbreakable, even though we are decidedly not.
Yes. Yeah, no, it is just kind of funny comparing those 2 pairs, because it's just, you know, they could not be more different in any other way, but they're right. They're both very close to each other. So
it is actually really nice to see, I think, on Survivor, to see like a male-female duo that are close in age, like a Malcolm and Denise thing, or even a Aris and Sari or something, that are really tight pair, and it's not like either by themselves or, you know, from, I mean, I don't remember what the fandom was like by then, but like, you know, made into like a romantic thing. Because I know certainly in the future, like Gabby and Christian isn't, but the fandom certainly was like, they should kiss. Including my mom, by the way. She was very disappointed to see Christian's girlfriend come at the family visit. I was like, Mother, we don't ship real people.
No, yeah, don't.
But you know, it is not, you know, like, hey, guess what? They can be friends.
Yeah. No, it is actually very nice to see.
The comparison is that Becky and Yule elevate one another, right? They help each other and they, you know, help them work. And Adam is dragging Candace just straight down.
Yeah,
totally.
I mean, obviously she is a young woman, so there's, you know, there's often limits to how well a younger woman is going to navigate this game. Not always, though. Some have won. But like when she's separate from him, when she, like, literally when she was separated from him, she seemed, you know, very smart, you know, ahead for the game. She was, you know, maneuvering well socially, both, you know, constructing that alliance with Becky and Yule and Penner, but also, you know, shoving Yule out from under it. But also, you know, Ozzy tried to come to her with a, you know, very good negotiation of, hey, how about us? No, well, then you're not going to eat. Right. So, like, she, you know, she's feasting at a challenge and all of that. And then as soon as she just steps over there, it's just, and like, there is a metaphor there, just like how the Adams of the world can just drag a good woman down.
Thank God she found John Cody, man.
Yep. Real step up there.
Dr.
Real
John
big step
Cody,
up there.
Yeah.
So the one thing we haven't talked about this episode is, of course, the person who went home. So why Nate?
It's a textbook, and yeah, credit to Yule for following a textbook that I'm sure he's never read. If you're trying to get somebody to flip, you let the flipper pick the target. It's really not that hard. Unless like there is like an absolute strategic reason of why it has to be a specific person. And at this stage of the game, there should be a level of flexibility at this point that just winning, getting one number fewer is more important than anything.
Here's the
something Raro doesn't understand.
Right. But here's the thing, even from a strategic point of view, Nate makes a ton of sense for
once Hunter brings him up, you almost went like, perfect. Because
great specifically for Yul and Becky. And again, why I think saying the idol thing is so important, because then Ozzy's like, all right, like that's kind of a bummer, but I'll vote for him. Whereas like if it's just like, hey, I think we get Jonathan to flip, but we have to vote on Nate, and there's no thought of protection of the idol, I don't know. Ozzy might
I actually, sure. I agree. Yeah, I think Ozzy would have balked more in that situation, and I think they might have like targeted someone else. But this is like where showing the idol and having Jonathan pick the target. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, and that's what you do. Like it's one side is like, okay, we're gonna, we want you. We're going to appeal to you. You choose the target. You tell us that, it's like this is how we can do it. You tell us any additional terms. The other side is like, we're not going to listen to you. Shut up. Like, go away.
You can't have the idol.
Yeah. If it wasn't Nate though, like if Penner hadn't set it up like that, and Penner hadn't told them anything, because our hypothetical was that Penner moves the target off of him. It was going to be Candace, right? Like just going forward.
Yes, 100%.
Considering they always sent her to exile, yeah, I would assume as much.
Yeah.
And frankly, like keeping her around another vote is actually not so bad, because that's another object of unity for the four. Just like, hey, that person we bonded over hating, which is just such a powerful group dynamic. If you can find
it's so powerful.
Where
it's so
everybody
powerful.
just like there's somebody they don't like. I mean, we're not like that because we're good and pure people, but like it's something I've read about and I've heard about.
Some of my best friendships formed by hating other people.
Yeah. Hey, since this is it for him, we should probably discuss Nate as a contestant and such.
Also, I think we should say, why Nate for Aitu, but also why Nate for Jonathan. And I think this is where the theme was a bad idea. Cannot say that enough.
Idea.
The theme was a bad idea. Because in a vacuum, of course, Jonathan's like, well, not the one who's not my original tribe mate, who I don't know as well. Sure, that seems reasonable, but the optics.
Yeah. Honestly, thank you. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's thought I had. It's like we've had these discussions throughout, because how could we not? To not have these discussions throughout would be putting our heads in the sand, the way that Survivor was trying to do, of all the problems of doing this. And I wanted to say real quick that like we're cognizant of like there's a delicate line we're trying to walk of being like pointing out the ridiculousness of it, and also being an ally. But also I worry sometimes, maybe me especially, maybe this is a me statement more than a we, that I in doing so, I might cross over to the point where I'm sounding like I'm saying I would have voted for Obama for a third time if given a chance. So I want to know, I'm cognizant that there's a lie, and I'm working on it. But yeah, this is like, so we pointed out that like it's pretty hinky. How, hey, look at that, they voted out 2 minorities and didn't fill in the other minority there last week, and now we're at a complete whiteness at the end of this vote. But to be fair to them, a thing I'm not necessarily excited to do all the time, because them includes Adam. The other dynamic at play is what you say. Like it is like, we've seen it plenty of times in Survivor, people just wanting to go back to their original alliance. And they didn't ask to be put in an original alliance of all white people. Again, if Brad had flipped over, as he's probably said, for one, he probably had a good reason. The other tribe, didn't like him because he didn't swim that one time. But it wouldn't feel as bad in doing so. So that is another reason why you don't do it. Even if you're like, we know we're going to mix them up and it's going to be this great story of integration and, the nature of America and all this. No, you can't play in these waters, man. You're putting everybody in a bad
idea.
Bad idea. Okay.
So, Nate specifically, a lot of the season he has seemed pretty charming, like he's had a fun energy, and I kept saying, well, just wait. And we did mention 2 weeks ago that just out of nowhere he decided to call Brad and Nancy boy for not competing. which gives it like it wasn't necessarily a gay slur, but it also wasn't not, because
it was said
it's suggesting that his lack of physical activity in one challenge is feminine. So then I was like, maybe I should let Emma talk here, because you know, were typing about your reaction to Nate and, you know, how maybe we've been overreacting. And then, you know, we get to the exact final part of the book.
Well, I think it's specifically, some of it is because like last week you were saying like, oh, we'll see why Penner wants to vote Nate out. So in my head, I'm like kind of remembering, especially after the flip happens, you know, and how the other Raros talked to him. So I was like, oh, does he must like berate him or something like that? I don't remember. And like there is a little bit of the like, you don't need to lead us, man, stuff. And I'm like, how Andy was like, that feels awfully
real quick.
overblown.
I'll say, I think I was also probably conflating a bit of what is about to happen with Penner.
I think and
right. Roping Nate in, and also maybe some backstage stuff. But again, I think a lot of that might be there. But then,
and so I type on. We have, you know, a little group chat about watching this season, and so I typed on. I was like, I don't know. I think there's all this warning about Nate's gonna break bad as like a little overblown, and then I'm like, and then came the final words. You know, oh, buddy, no.
So
I mean, it's just
2006 was a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago.
And it's twice. It seems like whenever that's Nate's angry, that's where he goes.
Exactly. I mean, and that was my point. You know, like it's twice now, and that's where he goes, and that's the point where you're like, yep, that's why I don't remember being a big fan of Nate. You know, and it's like it's bad. It's really, really bad, and I don't think there really is anything more to say about it, frankly.
I just want to I think that was exactly my experience, because I also had fuzzy memories of like, oh, Nate seems kind of fun. And frankly, I was probably, oh, it's too bad that it's Nate. For one, you know, he seemed to have like this good rapport with Ozzy, somebody that I liked at the time. For two, I hated Adam and Candace, so that would make it too bad. But then, I think it was probably as soon as he did his final words, it's like, oh, fuck that guy. And that's why I don't remember him fondly from here on out.
Not a good taste to leave in everyone's mouth as you leave.
No. Okay, let's check in with our viewing partners now that we're, you know, like an hour into our podcast. No, I mean, this was an important episode. This was a fun episode. There's a lot that happened here. I'm just teasing the fact that we always go long.
You know, so like the audience that we have always like followed us as long as we go. So I don't know if it's something we need to apologize. We always kind of feel like maybe they don't want to listen to us, but apparently they do. We don't understand.
This is true. This is true. We have no indication that people stop listening to us after like 45 minutes. In fact, you know, we have no indication that they wouldn't want us talking for even longer. We're going to try not to do that, but anyway, check in with our viewing partners. Emma, hit us up.
So you heard a little bit. We called Penner flipping pretty quickly, and it's like, you cannot work with these people. When Nate and Ozzy were like bonding, he said they were like bulls in a china shop. I think he did not trust their ability to come up with their own plan, I think is what he meant. Because I was like, physically, that doesn't make any sense. I think he said they were mentally like that. In that, these two are going to take over the game, I'm sure. And then this is fun. So first of all, after this episode, he's like, that was a good episode, unprompted. You love to see it. And also when Jonathan is talking at like Tribal Council, he's just like, I think Jonathan would be a good candidate to come back. You know,
there you
having
go.
previously not liked him at all. And he still, I think he's like, well, I'm glad he flipped, but I don't know, you know. What's still deeply hilarious to me is even after this flip, he's still like convinced Parvati wins.
And this is confirmation bias there. Yeah.
Yes, it's confirmation bias, Casino, which what it really means is this man has heard me talk about Parvati so much before he's ever watched Survivor. Oh no. What have I done? Like just this poor guy every time I finish an episode. So and then this time this happened. Blah, blah, blah. And like, oh yeah, my friend entered this contest and now Parvati follows her. Like, all of this very thing, and it's so sad. I feel bad. I am definitely the one who talks the most in the relationship. Shocker, I'm sure. And but he's still rooting for Yule. But so when he said Jonathan would come back, I kind of was like, I asked again, like, oh, who do you think, okay, who do you think the returnees are then? And he still said Cowboy, even though I already told him Cowboy doesn't come back.
He doesn't believe you. He
and
thinks you're
mine
like
are not
Jonathan
the
Penner and you have
same.
the idol.
They just don't retain the stuff like we do because, again,
Yeah.
established normal people. Much like I'm sure I will have to tell my wife for a third time later this season, the next time the Chiron comes up, that Parvati has boxer listed as her occupation because she did foxy boxing, which look it up, but maybe not when you're out.
Yeah, that is one that I am glad that my viewing partner has not caught yet.
Yeah, we have not addressed that yet either. But yeah, and he still says Candace and Parvati because he's like heard them spoke about. I'm still confused about him knowing about Candace. I don't feel like I talk about Candace very much, but who knows? Sure and then he's like, okay, Jonathan, and he's like, I can't think of who the fifth would be. And I'm just like watching the show.
Did he listen to our Heroes versus Villains podcast?
Of course not. But like,
maybe he loves you that much.
But like, I can get like, okay, if he doesn't think Yule wins because he thinks Parvati wins, he's not going to automatically figure out winners at war. But not latching on to Ozzy at this point is hilarious to me. Like.
So
but he's never seen a returning season. He doesn't know what happens. He's still shooken up that Todd and Shane have never come back. So
which is fair. The fans.
Yeah, which is fair.
So on the opposite end of that particular spectrum, so my viewing partner admitted to me that she was talking to another one of her friends who mentioned that that friend mentioned that she was going back and rewatching old Survivor seasons. And Ozzy came up, and so she was like, "Oh, well, I'm watching, Ozzy's. I'm watching this season, and Cook Islands, or like I think she may have even called it Race Wars." But one of us, right? And then this person said something about Ozzy, and so now the person I'm watching with, I asked her who she thinks wins, and she's like, "Oh, well, I think Ozzy wins because this person was talking about her." And I said, "Okay." So how I said
you're gonna have that suspense for a while. That's fun.
Well, what I did say was, okay. I said, okay, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I will say this. How I said there are 5 people from the season that come back? Ozzy's one of them. And she's like, oh, well, that means he doesn't win because if you win, you don't come back. I'm like, well, you remember how I said there is a season of all winners? She's like, oh, right, okay. So I think I have now
the seasons that aren't all winners.
I also said that too. But I think I like seeded enough doubt that but I do think she thinks Ozzy wins now, which, right. But and so that's kind of where her current pick is as to the end of the season. I asked her basically about like everyone remaining. She absolutely hates Adam and Candace, finds them completely disgusting. Yes. I mean, right. Yes. No, she's like, I don't want to watch this. Stop showing me that show. This is gross.
She's not wrong.
No, she is not wrong. She has like in the past couple episodes done a gigantic U-turn on Jonathan Penner. Went from being like, oh, that guy, to being like, oh, he's the only, it's like, he is like the only like adult among these kids. Like, and then she was like, rooting for him to turn on them the entire episode. And she was like, of course he turned on you. You were not even trying. You weren't thinking. You weren't doing anything. She is completely in the bag for the Aitu Four. She, at the end of the episode, I was like, okay, so we're only watching one this week. And she's like, damn it. She like wants to see what happens next. She is very, very into it to the point where I have convinced her to watch future seasons of Survivor. So this has been a gigantic success.
Also, I think if you start with Cook Islands and your viewing partner doesn't like the Aitu Four, I think you have to dump them.
I think that's the rule, yeah. They're like,
or like shoving friends with them, move out, whatever the relationship is, emancipate.
It would be a giant red flag if you're like, I don't know why, but I'm really rooting for that other group.
That's a good point. That is a good point.
Yeah, so the reaction of both of your viewing partners, and both will be like, oh, this person of whom I've heard spoken of must be the winner, I think really helps highlight people in their edgic, and a lot of people there is like, you don't need to be spoiled to be spoiled. You know, all it takes is a bunch of people in the preseason talking about someone, I don't know, let's name them Michelle. And then all of a sudden you watch the show through the entire lens of believing that this person everybody's talking about must be the winner, and then use that to say, so no, see, I knew I was able to figure it out due to the show, and not because I don't go to spoiler sites. And I think like I'm yeah, obviously people are conditioned to whenever I bring up something like this that I'm just like, you know, like tweaking people. But no, legit, I think this is what happens so often, because there is no reason why even an amateur viewer of Survivor, clearly we're professional viewers, would believe that the party on display is the winner of this season. It's only because the name is ringing out there, and I think that's what's happened in other seasons. So people are like, no, I was able to predict it completely, but I wasn't spoiled. It's like, you were spoiled by going to places where the conversation is tainted by those who are spoiled. You too can become spoiled.
It's also, I think, worth mentioning that, you know, aside from that, he's heard about her and thus hasn't seen anything particularly impressive, and so he's like, so something must happen, you know, which I'm like, haha, just you wait. But the reason, you know, otherwise that he thinks she could win, first of all, because with the Muni, he was convinced that a white person wins, and it can't be Adam or Candace, because who would vote for
obvious reasons, right? Yes.
But also was like, well, you know, she's very like, she's always like there, but she's like pretty under the radar. She's like not driving the decision. She's not getting negative content. And I just was like, it's so interesting that you think that's, and again, he's only, before this new era, he had only really seen Ko Wrong. I didn't watch the finale because I went to it live, but heard about the result.
Right.
So. I just think it's funny.
I love that we're still fighting these 5-year-old, 6-year-old fights.
What's great is that I'm fighting a battle that we lost horribly, and I don't care. Much like, you know, half of your country, I will continue to fight a battle in which we were absolute losers on.
This is our lost cause, I think, is what you're saying.
Oh,
Too far. And then one other thing I wanted to point out, you know, so both partners, every good, you know, person in the world with even like the modicum of a soul hates Adam and Candace. That is what the show is going for. Like, that's
100%.
Like, we're not supposed to be rooting for these two crazy kids to really make it happen. And like, I really noticed in this episode, in that when they're showing them making out, like, you know, pre-merge, the music was incredibly ominous. It was like, it was not like, I'm not somebody who, you know, writes down the music cues on my scorecard, but it was unavoidable. Like, it was discordant, really. It was otherwise like a, you know, a lighthearted, you know, two attractive people having fun, and it was like boom, boom, boom.
Well, and this is why I actually think the Adam Parvati moment was included, because it wanted, this was their way of dispelling.
This is not a pure love.
Exactly. This was their way of dispelling, like, it's like even if you like, crazy people might actually be like, oh, well, these two people really like it. It's like, no. These are just young and horny people.
This is no Rob and Amber, baby.
Right, exactly. And I think that scene is very important to kind of dispel like that comparison.
Totally.
The one other thing my viewing partner was, so I asked her about, you know, Becky and Sundar, and she likes them. I asked her about, you know, like Ozzy and Yul, and she like really likes them. What's not to like? So I asked her about Parvati at the end. She's like, oh, that's like the one person it's hard to get a read on. Like, it seems that she's like, you know, doing well, but I don't know if that's because she's like actually like really playing the game well, or if she's just incredibly beautiful. And I'm like, well, good question there. At this point,
Parvati is, you can never really separate the.
Can't really tell.
Even when she's doing incredibly well.
Yes. So I did find that a kind of And also, you know, like I am not married to the person I'm watching with, so when they talk about that, I think I feel like I got to tread a little like lightly when it's like, yes, I can see that. Yes, I can see how one would think
Meanwhile,
that
I'm like,
about
look
her.
Whereas
at
we
you
with our
there.
spouses are like high-fiving each other. Absolutely.
Right, exactly.
like the part where in the challenge, you know, where Yule is like, oh, elephants and blah blah blah, and then and it's like, oh, I'm never gonna get a date again. And Barbara's like, oh, it's kind of sexy, and I'm like, and then the episode proceeds to show Yule without his shirt, and I'm like, yeah, he's never gonna find a date.
But I can't believe we didn't talk about that moment. That's another one of my favorite moments of this entire season. Yule talking about elephants and physics and surface area is just like one of the great Survivor moments. And it's buried because this episode is so good.
It's great. I mean, that's such like a sort of iconic challenge, and you see multiple people who are great at that challenge in it, which is fun because we're going to see, you know, Parvati eventually do very well at that challenge. Ozzy's obviously great. And yeah, like clearly this is something that's more geared towards smaller people, but it's really funny to me that after, you know, and Ozzy's like, God, it's like, oh, like Ken's like, oh, could have you gone longer? He's like, yeah, I probably could have stayed longer. Like, I mean, when he celebrates, he takes off an arm.
It is.
Like,
he is not.
But my favorite part is that he's like, yeah, like when we were up there, like after an hour, I was like, oh man, this is gonna suck. After an hour, only 3 people were left.
Yup.
That was just his stretch.
Ozzy!
Well, and what was crazy was like Ozzy just didn't move for like most of that time. Like,
it didn't seem like he had to reposition. He was just like, this is good.
No, he was just like that. And Candace was like straight as an arrow for like an hour and a half, you know, and like it just.
Yeah, it was funny that they're like, oh, she's showing off when she was sort of squatting down. I was like, honestly, she probably just needs to like stretch her legs a little bit, like it's hyperextended.
Yeah.
But
when it started, I asked my wife, it's like, who do you think she's going to win? She's like, I don't know. Like, come on. And she's like, oh, yeah, Ozzy. It's like Mowgli, the Jungle Book boy, is going to win this challenge.
You've seen this?
Well, no, that I don't care about. It's fine.
I know, but it's, I mean, you've seen him do this challenge more than once.
But my girlfriend also, like, she's all trying. She's like, oh, well, I guess this favor is kind of strong. No, you know, we've seen Ozzy climb trees before. And I'm like, yeah.
Well, frankly, even if he didn't win, he's your pick. You know, like it's an upset if he doesn't win, right?
Yeah.
Based on like just the information of the season, as you pointed out.
Right.
So I'm so glad we're watching this season. You know, while we love taking as much time off as possible from a thing that we ostensibly enjoy, we enjoy actually talking to each other and having a podcast and a website. But I'm glad we filled it with this season. But soon we might not have to just talk about stuff that we've known about for years.
Yeah, we got new Survivor on the horizon. Survivor is back in production. I think honestly the timeline will line up with a new season for the fall. So
that's what I suspect too. It would be weird to burn content in the summer, really.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, unless CBS really needs them to fill schedule, I think is basically the only way that happens. But I think they'll save it for the fall. So
yeah, might as well regulate back.
Yeah, and you can always throw a bunch of like losers in a house if you want something to air over the summer.
Right. But what the reason why we brought this up is because, you know, we're curious. Like, what are, you know, you, our listeners, hoping for from an upcoming season? And what are we hoping for from an upcoming season? So, Andy, you brought this up. What are you hoping for?
Yeah, so I mentioned this in comments, but not everybody reads the comments. In fact, you know, since there's only about like
you bastards read the comments, damn it.
Let's assume that the Baster audience is
if you're cool.
Okay. I desperately need this to be a feel-good season. I think, the time off, I think Survivor really needs to reward people. It needs to feel like a celebration that, you know, we're back to Survivor. And frankly, especially if this coincides with the fall, that we're getting back to life, you know, back to like what life was. And if they come back and it's just like there's a bunch of fucking atoms or whatever, you're like, fuck you. I don't want to see this. I want to feel good about this. And so I hope they don't cast anyone. Like often the show will be like, oh, this person's going to be a really good villain. This is going to be an antagonist to drum stuff up. don't do that. I don't care. Lean into it like in a cheesy friggin', we're building a house.
Everyone's there to make
heroes.
friends. Everyone is there to make friends. Come on, let's see it.
Yeah.
Let's see it.
And people can still betray each other. People can still play the game, but just don't be assholes. And if there are assholes, edit around it. I don't care. Lie to me. And part of this is also like throughout the pandemic, I've strayed away from a lot of like harsher entertainment choices. I've been watching a lot of like Canadian like sitcoms, and like nobody does meaningless B plots like Canadian sitcoms. It's like there's no like.
Are you gonna rewatch My Boys?
Yeah, and I'm like, just give it to me. I don't need any of that challenge. And this is especially true when Survivor comes back. Just lean into it, because we're all gonna feel good that we get to see it again. The people on it should feel really good that they get to A, be on it, and B, be out of the house. And that's, I think, just more than anything else, they need to make us feel good. And if they don't, they fucked it.
Yeah, so I have a smaller subset of basically that same request of what I want to see. No Dans. Just no Dans. No.
Not a single person.
Not just like the person that you're referring to, but you cannot cast somebody whose name is
bad track record.
That's correct. Yep. No, you nailed both parts of that. So, because I mean, honestly, before Winners at War, the thing that that had us so down on that season before was obviously a really awful incident, but also just the thought that the show can't handle itself, and that it is kind of like done, like and I think this year has actually really helped kind of gain distance from that. And so I want that feel good season, and I want it not just because I want those good vibes, but I want it because it shows like, hey, no Dans. Like we looked out for that. We didn't cast this type of asshole.
Just to avoid any loopholes, no Dan, because we don't want them to think they can have one.
That's right. Yeah, this isn't the No Homers Club. So
I apologize for that, but I couldn't resist.
No, you don't have to apologize. It's a Simpsons reference. Always room for it. What are you looking for, Emily?
Yeah, so besides what you guys mentioned, because I agree wholeheartedly, and we know, sorry, my computer's chosen this moment to send me every reminder known to man. And no, I don't need to update anything. This computer is from 2012. But anyway, what do I want from this season of Survivor? So we've all kind of heard they have their new diversity initiative, which is great. I hope that that's, legit, and they don't, do a lot of like
don't do this. That was like the monkey's paw that I worried about. It's like, we're gonna have a diverse season and we're
or don't satisfy diversity criteria with like a bunch of twofers. Like, oh well, this one person counts for both the African American quotient and the Hispanic quotient because they have both heritage. It's like, no, that doesn't count. Like, as both, it counts. So
or like have like, and not that these people's identities are valuable, but have like a bunch of white passing people and be like, they're BIPOC, it's fine.
Yep.
And or something like that. It's okay to have more than 50%, guys. You can do that too. You don't have to just hit the minimum. And also that addressing what Andy said about what he left in the comments, what I added is like, it's like a millennials versus Gen X vibe, but not just voting all the women of color up first, because 50%, but like as we've seen, the 8-person Raro tribe was 4 white people and 4 people of color, and we saw how that turned out. So because white people versus all people of color are not like two equally like attached to each other groups. People have different cultures and backgrounds and blah, blah, blah. You're not a monolith because you're not white. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And so I just hope that the tribes are like in a way that it's not just going to be like what we see so often, and having to deal with after these like past couple years of just watching shit like that go down, because we don't need that. Also, one other thing, would love a woman to win.
That would be nice. Oh, that'd be really nice. It's been so long.
That'd be cool. That'd be nice. A woman
nice.
who preferably isn't a MAGA supporting cop. I don't know. Just like
Also
my
would
personal
be nice.
take is what I'd prefer.
And even and also preferably is actually on the season.
That would also be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Has confessionals.
Yes,
is
it
involved.
is an active part of the season. Yeah. So
no fire tokens. No edge of extinction. I think we actually know they're not going to do edge for a while. But like we were saying, like cool it a little bit on the Advantage guys. We would like to have real alliances and like storytelling.
Yeah.
And
at
not
least
just
a little bit.
Not just have it be like a survivor simulation, Brant Steele or whatever it's called, where it's just like, oh, they decided to vote for this person for no reason.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't have, they don't have an idol or an advantage or blah, blah, blah. So they just voted for them by default.
Right.
Yeah. My hope is that with the time off, it maybe just resets them a bit, because what happens, and even in our worthless little podcast, every season we try to find another gimmick just to give us a new thing to talk about. And I think that's what happens with them. It's like, okay, well, we're doing it's a new season, we got to come up with something new. And I think that's a bit admirable, and that's why the show has been able to still be good and fight against people just playing the same game every time. But when you pile them up on top of each other, and every year and twice a year you feel like you've got to top yourself, it starts to become a problem. I hope that having 12 months off of this thing, just be like, we don't need to, we just need to do it. We've missed Survivor so much that we don't need to come up with a way to beat it. Now the worry though is that they're so bored that they spend all this time coming up with ideas. I do know, like when the pandemic started,
you just struck fear in my heart.
Yeah, well, like even with my job, my nothing job that barely was affected by people having to work from home. Like the first couple of weeks, everybody's like, "Oh, wait, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? How are we gonna get past this?" I was like, you guys got to need to buckle down. We're going to be here a while. But I could see like them being that way. It's just like, it's just idle hands and idle thoughts being that way. The IDLE, not OL.
We got you.
And so I worry about that, but I could see the opposite happening, that they now, able to take a breath, able to take a step back, and also just missing just the very experience of being out there filming it, having Survivor, will be like, we don't need to do anything new and special. This existing is new and special of its own.
Especially what I hope could help with that is that we've actually have seen kind of a resurgence of a lot of people who started watching it during, while being in quarantine, including, people who are famous. Not that that's everything, but that, strikes more attention. We
know they got the ear of at least one producer.
Right. Like, you have Keke Palmer tweeting about it. You have Matthew McConaughey is like talking about it on Colbert. And just, all over, and then all over Twitter, many drag queens from Drag Race have been watching Survivor.
2 seasons were on Netflix. It has been.
And that's I think kind of left to elsewhere, and I hope seeing that buzz has allowed them to see more of what people actually do like and what they don't like, because as much as we talk about like, oh, the casuals and us and blah, 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 I do think, even the casuals aren't necessarily like stoked on just like chaos constantly.
In fact, I think the casuals probably like chaos even less than we do.
Yeah, because you can't follow it.
Yeah.
It's hard to know what's happening. So I hope, and seeing the kinds of people they like and what people are upset about, you see people tweeting about, how certain voting patterns can happen. Now, obviously they're working, to fix that. But like you were saying, don't cast Dan's. You don't have to like this whole like all walks of life thing. You can just like check and make sure someone's not racist or sexist. It doesn't like have to like make it more interesting by having a misogynist on your tribe.
Yeah, what I hope, one thing I hope is that, and this is a reference solely for Andy, I hope they basically get like a double draft year. Sometimes in the NBA draft will reclassify who's eligible for it. And so you'll get like basically twice the prospects, because the guys who already would have been the top prospects entering are eligible, but then the guys who would be usually for the next year get reclassified into this year, they're eligible too. There's a chance that because we skip a year, we get like a double draft year and they get basically like, a whole bunch of applicants and like they'll have like twice as many good ones. So like they really can pick and choose and they like, and they really get like a really good crop of applicants. Like I hope that's, like I could see that being the case. Like I really hope we just get like a good cast because at the end of the day, a good cast is what does it. So
here's one last hope from me. Let's hope COVID doesn't rip through the entire broadcast and taping.
Yeah,
kill people when they get home. We should probably just note that like
that should be the top one.
Back, and I do think that there's probably been enough time for them to put in good procedures and all that. There was a good reason for them not to film. Yes. Let's hope that they get that part right more than anything else.
Yes. Okay. So I think we're good for this week. So next week, we're actually not sure how many episodes we're going to watch. And so what we're going to do is we're going to throw a poll up on our website on the podcast post. There's going to be a couple options. If you care, vote in that poll. Because basically the next 3 episodes we think should be combined in some way. But we're just not sure how we want to do it. And so we're lazy and we're going to let you decide for us. So
not so much that we're lazy. We just argued about it and never came to an answer. So we need you guys
that's
to
the thing.
help
We
us.
Can't decide. So please vote. And actually, because we're going to be getting this podcast out early, please vote by Saturday because, like we'll close the poll.
That's usually when we start watching.
And that's usually when we start watching. So then we would have enough time ahead. So,
and if there's extra, we want you to have time to watch what you need to watch. People are starting to go back to work and stuff like that. You might not have as much free time. So we want to make sure you're caught up with us.
Right. And so where can they find our website to vote in that poll, Emma?
What an excellent question, Matt. They can find that at purplerockpodcast.com.
Twitter?
Why, if they would have feedback they'd like to share, or perhaps want to see what the results are or need a link, that's at Purple Rock Pod. If they'd like to hear anything I am not willing to say on my personal Twitter account, they can follow me at Purple Rock Emma. If they want to hear Andy, I don't even know how he divides his energy between his 2 different accounts, but if you want to hear Survivor takes, it's at Purple Rock Andy, and then I guess there's also at Purple Rock Matt.
Yep. So let's hit that theme music.